This episode of the Local Hustlers podcast is sponsored by Crossbow Equine. If you own a business, you need to check out Crossbow Equine for all of your social media marketing and branding needs. Throughout her entrepreneurial journey, owner Kylie Bowen has gained a deep understanding of marketing, branding, and telling your story in an authentic professional manner to help you gather raving fans and paying clients and customers. For our listeners only, Kylie is offering a free 30-minute consultation call and 50% off your first month of services. Contact her today at 480-254-7650.
You're listening to the Local Hustlers Podcast, East Valley Locals. Get connected with small businesses near you and dive deep into their stories, mindset, and motives. Entrepreneurs everywhere. Get ready to be inspired by business owners, entrepreneurs, and hustlers that you can relate to and learn from. And now, your hosts, Dallin Huso and Ridge Waldberg.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Local Hustlers podcast. This week, we're super excited to be here with Marty Oelrich of Saw and Steel. How's it going, Marty?
Good. Thank you for having me.
No, yeah, super excited. Super excited to have you here today. Why don't you take a couple of minutes before we kind of dive into Saw and Steel, give us a little quick background on your life and what led you to where you are today.
Quick background on my life and what led me to where I am today. All right. Actually, originally from South Minneapolis, so I grew up in Minneapolis. I think before I was 21, I had like 17 different addresses, so I kind of hopped around. Yeah. I lived in everywhere from North Dakota to northern Minnesota to Bangladesh, and so this is actually my second career. Prior to this, I went to school for psychology, and so I actually have a background in forensic psychology, and so that's what I was doing full time up until about 5.5 years ago when we started this, and so completely different subject line of work, and so I was a subject matter expert in a bunch of areas, mainly credibility assessment, which is again super obscure. So I've done a lot of very different stuff, but it all is filtered into the current business. And so ultimately the background helped shape and mold a lot of things that I do today, and so I view things very differently than somebody who would have off the bat gone into manufacturing or art school or something along those lines. So I have no traditional background in art or manufacturing, etc. And so it's been all learning along the way. So as a second career, so to say, hobby job became full-time job.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm super excited to kind of hear, how that's correlated and benefited you. But first off, how did you decide to get into psychology in the first place?
Just a couple of interesting professors in undergrad, and I was supposed to go into computer science. I took my first class, and I absolutely hated it, and ended up in psychology and loved it, and just interesting. And so ended up doing a lot of jobs. I've worn a lot of what I would call geek hats, and so I've participated or assisted in lots of different research projects, everything from predicting human behavior to, I did a lot of training for a long time as a expert in interviewing people regarding internet use. So just all these random tidbits, and they've all flowed into now I have an e-commerce, internet-based company, and so it fits very oddly, I suppose.
That's super cool. And so you're doing like internet stuff. What was kind of the job, or what was your, desire to do for work, like for the rest of your life before this came about?
Didn't really have a plan. So, I kind of say, take the opportunities that you're handed, and so go with them. So, we get opportunities all the time. We either decide to take them or let them pass by. And so, I was looking for something to do, high stress, chaotic job, and looking for something that was easier mentally, I guess, as far as, kind of the feel that and the kickback you get, art is very different. And it just was really an accident getting into this, ultimately, we started as a result of me making gifts, before this business. All the gifts I would give to my wife were handmade, so like I did my first painting for a gift for her, something that reminded me of where we had been. And then the gift that actually led to the business was I had seen some marquee lights, and this is way early on before they were a thing, and I said, oh, that'd be super cool to make for my wife for Christmas. I had no welding background, had never done any work with sheet metal or any metal projects really. I had always done woodworking as a hobby, and so somehow did that, and she posted it after she got it, got a bunch of requests from her friends, and finally...
Not her friends' husbands, though.
Yeah, right? Oh, can you make something for me? And a lot of times there's just a lot of vibrato around that, right? People will, oh my gosh, I really like that. Will you make me one? And some of it never pans out, and finally, a couple of friends ended up purchasing something, and our first one was for one of her friends who had an event company, and ultimately ended up being for a retired NFL player, and so that's kind of how the business started. That was the first gig, completely over my head, didn't know what I was doing entirely, learning along the way. And so again, there was an opportunity, and even though it was difficult, we took it, and here we are today, down the road.
Yeah.
Wow.
So are you naturally super good with your hands? Because if I had seen some metal work with lights on it, I'd think, oh, where can I buy that? Not how can I make that? So how did you figure that out?
Yeah, my dad was an architect.
Okay.
And so I grew up in an environment that, I built stuff and took it apart. I remember taking apart my dad, when they'd get rid of TVs when I was little, or a washing machine or something, they would let me have it first so I could take it apart. And so, it's neat learning about things through interactive experiences.
Yeah.
And did a lot of that, but I did woodworking, and so as I was in college and in high school, I worked in all these jobs that, I did framing for several years. So, you're building homes and whatnot. But I did everything from finish work to other aspects of building, and so my dad was always drawing, there were plans all over the house all the time. So, you kind of come up in that environment, and so naturally you gravitated. There was a period of time I wanted to go to school to be an architect. My thing is kind of want to do everything. And he kind of steered me away from that at that point.
Yeah.
But I think it was really just being around a lot of that, building stuff.
Yeah.
We built our own home. I wired the electrical in our house when I was 16. And so really gravitated towards it. And so doing it as a hobby in my garage. And yeah.
So making that first project, or those first few projects, did you really enjoy making it? Did you feel like it was a passion of yours?
Oh yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
I really don't enjoy buying gifts for people. It's really difficult for me to do that because people reject gifts. And there's so much facade that goes on with gift giving, and I think there's something, there was something really genuine about giving something that you had put a lot of thought into, whether, it's not just making it, it's about the thought and
for
design,
sure, yeah.
and, how that's going to impact someone. It's just a much more personal connection.
Cool. So you make that first gift, and then your wife, you said she posted about it. So you start to get some attention. Was it more people just complimenting you, saying how good that was, or were people being like, hey, can I buy something?
No, okay. People were asking, if they could buy something. Then that first one came through, and then one of her other friends. And at that point, before we even sold the first one, we opened an Etsy store.
Okay.
So that way, there's some place for the transaction to occur. And originally, so if you look back at the first image we posted on Instagram, I think it's of a wine cork holder. So I was doing this recycled, refurbished wood and other stuff. And so early on, we had both some wood and metal products, and kind of seeing where it went, and it was the steel that took off. And so I really didn't have a preference. You're going to find enjoyment in what you're doing, otherwise you hopefully move on to something else. And so it didn't really matter which way I went. And so now here I am in metal, of course. But
And 6 years ago, you didn't even own a welder?
No.
You didn't know how to weld?
No, I had no metal tools. No metal tools at all. Yeah.
Wow. What a great story. What a great story. So, you talked about the personalization of the gift, and that, you, as you put that thought into it, it really made a difference in your wife. So obviously your customers aren't necessarily making the gift.
Yeah.
And so are you able to kind of do that for them? As you're creating things, is that kind of a driving mindset of providing that special touch?
I think in a way, yes. And I don't think it's necessarily in the way most people would assume. If we decide to take on a commission, so we get commissioned to make lots of stuff for lots of different people, and I don't always like it. It's not a matter of whether or not, that's kind of the reality. It doesn't matter whether or not I absolutely love it or like it. I'm trying to transpose their wish and their vision to this product. And I think a lot of times the expectation I hold for myself is to provide the best quality product that I can, regardless of my thoughts about it. If that was me giving it to somebody close to me, what would my expectation, before I would give it to them, and so part of it is that just rolls into the whole mentality of business. We do quite a bit of stuff for stuff that's pretty visible between whether it's TV, movies, celebrity type stuff, etc. But it doesn't really matter who it's for, because ultimately, you never know who's going to see it, and you really never know who it's for. If you wanted to give them the best product possible under those circumstances, it doesn't matter, because it's really about, like, if I'm going to take on a project for you, I'm either going to give you everything or nothing. And so making good decisions about that, because sometimes there's stuff you're just not going to be able to connect with. Right. And so that's part of the taking work on, if I can't see the vision, if I don't think I'm going to be able to fulfill what you want us to do, we're probably going to say, no, this might not be the best project for us.
And did you have that mindset from the beginning, or did you have to learn that lesson over time?
No, that's just operating. I mean, so part of my prior job was I spent, the better part of 15 years, every interaction I had with someone was audio and video recorded and accessible by the court. And so you always have to, so it's a level of, you find yourself following a level of perfection, right, to whatever possibility, you can. But it's a mindset.
So I guess going back a bit to your getting started, you're getting a couple orders in. At what point did you decide that you wanted to turn it into a business?
As soon as we saw that we could pay bills, it was self-supportive. I had the ability, because I was self-employed, I was a contractor. Okay. I was able to throttle my other business. Yeah. And so I had, that was really fortunate. Like, I didn't have to maintain like this full-time 40-hour rigid work week, right. 8 to 5. I had a lot of flexibility in it. And so,
Cool. Was it like an obvious thing, like, hey, this is a business that we can do, or was there a lot of thought that went into figuring it out?
I don't think there really was a lot of thought. Mm-hmm. Again, it's kind of go with the flow. Yeah. It's just, again, it's just kind of how I operate. Take opportunities you can if you can meet those expectations or whatnot. Expectations in the form of business. Being able to pay my bills, right. So I can do it, because of course, when you have a highly stressful regular job and on that's really thankless, mm-hmm. That's operating in the background, and then you have this other thing where people are actually like, oh, thank you so much, you did this, and people are paying for you to make them something, which is I don't stop and think about it a lot of times, but it's really neat, that people pay you to make stuff for them,
That's cool. And so starting off, it's just you, right? You're doing everything.
Yeah, just me and my wife.
Yeah.
We in our home garage. And then we had to get a storage unit, mm-hmm. and painting in the rocks next to the house late at night. So the HOA and my neighbors weren't on to me, and you're not supposed to operate that type of business, a manufacturing business, in an HOA. Yeah. So but it was really small scale. So 9:30 at night you go out and paint, and we would wire on the kitchen table, wire up lights and stuff like that, and package wherever we could, and just, so it was just me and my wife, and it was just kind of a hobby deal at that point. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, if we sold something, awesome. It was just, it was a very different reality.
And so you've always just kind of gone with the flow, it seems. So at that time, were you hoping, did you have aspirations that it would be what it is today, or were you just like, hey, I'm just going to do this and see what happens?
Yeah. Just kind of do it and see what happens. Take the opportunity while it's here. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't do anything to buffer it, though. I mean, that's really the reality, is like, it's coming. All right, keep taking it. And so, but there was no 5-year plan, thought out, there was no hardcore business plan or model and say, this is what I have to do, because I think that really sometimes that artificially confines you to some made up reality. So have implausible dreams sometimes. People think things now that I think about doing are, now that we've been in business for years and, seeing what we are capable of. And so, you might have some big ideas at times, but will they, if they come true, cool. If something else happens, that's cool too,
Yeah, the things you're able to dream up of today are much more grandiose than 4 years ago or 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So has that evolved, though? Have you created more of a formal business plan, or are you still kind of...
we have a fully operational business at this point. We have, on average, we have 8 employees, and so we have several full-time employees. And so, so business is thought of much differently early on in a lot of ways, but in other ways, we function on a whim as well. I get an idea and we can process it through and it can become a reality. Like, hey, I was just thinking about this, and we've got this product, or we could modify this product to do this, and I'd really like to see it in this store. Like, let's follow that path, and we can accomplish those things really quick. And so while it's definitely more formal and more rigid and all of that aspect, I have a team of people that can help manage those ideas which become realities.
Are your employees creative designers also, or are they more, hey, here's my idea, here's the plan, go make it?
Yeah, they're additive. Everybody is additive in different ways, but ultimately it's kind of like I'm the engine, but I can't function independently. It takes all of those components to operate, and so, sometimes I need my ideas throttled as well, and so it's good. Like, I enjoy having a team around me because it motivates me and it helps guide me at times. I get lots of feedback. And so, so as we're creating and making new stuff, I might make something that nobody knows about that's going on. I do this pretty frequently, and then I'll send them all a picture of the finished product and ask for feedback, colors, this, that, everything else. And so they are creative in that way that, I'm looking for other viewpoints because our customer base represents lots of different people. And so making sure that, we're creating things that are of interest to not just me. Like, you can make all the cool stuff in the world, but if nobody buys it, like, you're not paying your bills. So you end up with lots of projects that sit by the wayside and, sit in the corner of the shop and collect dust, and then you
got an expensive hobby, not a business, right?
Like, this is really cool. And so, so.
Cool. I'm curious because there's a lot of people that do start off with a big business plan and with goals and aspirations, and because of circumstances, it doesn't pan out to what they imagine it to be. And you, I guess, kind of went with the flow, and here you are. What are some things that you did throughout that process between 5-6 years ago and now that has kind of led you to the success you've had?
Learn to operate. Again, no background in any of this, so having to learn everything from operating CNC machines to being able to fully design and create things that I can, go from thought idea into finished product in a very, very short time frame. Like, there's some stuff that from thought to actual fabrication might be 30 minutes,
Right.
I don't have to go through all these places. And so a lot of it's been learning. Like, I had to learn to operate that machine. That was a lot of trial and error. I've been working at design programs now for every day. And so having to learn all of the individual components of a business, right? It's not just it's made up of lots of different things, design, fabrication, in our case, painting, finishing, wiring, electrical, and shipping. And there's all these components, and there's reasons why there's huge college and graduate programs that specialize in everything from logistics to all of these other areas. And so really, so I strive to become an expert in all of those areas. So in order to bring somebody on to operate that component, it takes a lot of information. I know more about shipping now than I ever hoped to, right? And so the amount of time we've spent learning it's just learning, so much learning. And that's where, so you can think ahead. So
that's cool. I think that's one of the keys to growing and scaling a business, kind of putting yourself in that position and learning it, knowing about it before you hire someone, so you know what that role is supposed to look like and that you can better manage that person in that role. Is that something that you just naturally learned, or did you read books or have role models that kind of helped you out with that?
No, just ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
You know, I think I've always been a little bit rebellious in the fact that question everything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But yeah, it's trying to learn from any method possible. You know, I'm on lots of different, Facebook groups for example. And they're specialized ones. Like, I might not do that thing, but I'm using that as an opportunity, micro opportunity of information. We're taking so much information, and so like on Facebook, most people are looking at what their friends are doing and all this other stuff. Like, oh yeah, they went here and did that, and half my feed is all these groups of stuff that's completely unrelated, and I might not, from auto painting groups, so I can, find improvements, what's necessary. They're talking about costs and all this other thing, to design or type of machine. Like, I don't even have that type of machine, but before buying it, I'm going to have a full spectrum of knowledge about its limitations and how to optimize it into my workflow, so that way, I can hit the ground running. And that's where you can, the more efficient you become with all of those things, the different types of jobs you can take on. You can pitch bigger runs of stuff to different people. So instead of just doing one thing, you become efficient enough because of all these things you've learned, and you can optimize all of it.
Cool. Tell us about the first employee you hired. How did you know that it was time for that hire, and what was the position that you filled?
Because I was working way too much. I have a history of working a lot. Like, I've worked more 100-hour weeks, and it's a little bit sad at the same time.
Wow.
Like, a lot of my life has been consumed with work, but because it's passionate.
Yeah.
And so, but at some point, there's just too much work that no matter how efficient you are, you can't handle it. And so, finally found somebody, and our first employee, we were looking for someone that we weren't looking for because our business kind of falls outside the lines of multiple other businesses. We don't really fit in a good, there's not any one good group of people,
right,
so to say. So lots of different skills, but a lot of it's passion. You want somebody that's passionate about it. That's somebody that's going to be invested in it, and so somebody that's doing it for a hobby, they're on that edge of doing it professionally or versus a hobby, because, they're motivated. And so we were able to find somebody, and they were with us for several years, and so, and that perpetuates itself, and then you're able to do so much until you're so busy that you can't handle it anymore, and you start finding people to do other components, and it's difficult with small businesses because you need people that are able to wear a lot of hats. Like, thinking of factories, we go through like 40,000 zip ties every 9 months.
Wow.
Which is a lot of zip ties. Like, in a lot of big factories, there's somebody just doing zip ties, right? Mm-hmm. That's all they do all day is just zip ties. But when you only have like 3 employees, you have to be able to do zip ties, but you also have to be able to do the wiring. And when I also need your help, I need you to package that, and I need you to paint prep, and and so you have to have somebody that is able to focus on and take on lots of different tasks. So it's just the people you have to find. That's why I think sometimes it's hear people say it's hard to find good help. Well, your expectations are much different than in like corporate job.
Right.
You need somebody that can do lots of stuff decently, and not just one thing really well, because one thing really well isn't helpful for all of the other stuff that's happening in in that smaller environment. And so you keep growing. Like, we just added to social media because like I partly didn't want to give it up, but I just had no time. And so understanding when to do that is a difficult thing. But so it's just as you need it, what things are consuming the most of your time. So to go back to your original question, the first person that we hired was somebody to do fabrication and help me wire, and so some of those things. So take on some of those big chunks.
For sure. Were you nervous to kind of let go of that and trust someone to do some of the fabrication?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned you're a perfectionist.
Yeah, one could, to some degree. So I have high expectations for myself, and for the work. It's so. I maintaining your vision and expectation of quality of work product. It's super. There's this inverse relationship. Like, the more concerned you are about quality, and higher expectations, more difficult to give it off. And so versus like, if you don't really care, like, hey, whatever.
take it.
Like, yeah, like, yeah, for sure. Definitely a little bit of a...
How do you let go enough to trust them, but not to, over micromanage them and let them do what's best?
It usually involves fatigue, which is might be a weird answer, but I have to be so exhausted mentally and physically from the volume of stuff I'm having to do that I'm almost overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And which isn't necessarily, I'm aware that that's not necessarily a good thing,
Yeah.
but that's one of the things that when I start feeling that, that's when I finally say, okay, I've reached my maximum capacity, so to say, and there's this negative return on efficiency, so to say. And so you just, you're exhausted. So even though you're super efficient, you're totally throttled because there's not enough left.
That's cool.
So yeah, and so you finally okay, I'm ready to let it go, and so recoup a little bit.
Nice. I think a lot of small business owners can relate to what you said, where when you're hiring someone at a small scale, you can't afford to hire someone to just do zip ties, but at the same time, you can't look for a resume that someone can do zip ties and fabricating and taking calls and shipping and all these things. So, what's the main thing you look for when hiring an employee?
I look for a lot of weird stuff. And I don't know if I can necessarily conceptualize that. Mm-hmm. But you're looking for skills that are related in some way, other activities that they're good with their hands, right? And I pay people very well, but I also, we work hard. And so it's I did all these, endurance things before. I used to do ultra marathons and stuff, and those are just kind of extensions of how I function, right? I like to test my performance ability, so to say, whether that's at work or other things, so it's a certain mentality, and you get that when you talk to people. It's a level of motivation, finding people that are motivated, which can be difficult, of course. And so, so I don't think, that's a lot of interacting with people. Yeah. And so being willing to interview a bunch of people rather than just one or two, and so it takes time, but sometimes we'll interview a bunch of people, for one position. So just until okay, we want to see all of our options.
Yeah.
Right. Is turnover an issue? Because you're looking for someone who has this startup mentality that can do multiple things and is kind of self-driven. Hey, there's an issue, I'm going to go solve it. You can't, in your environment, you can't just babysit people and tell everyone exactly everything they need to do. And people with that mentality generally are looking to grow themselves and new opportunities. So is there enough within your company for them to continue to grow within? Or do they do their thing and then hey, I'm going to start my own thing and go on and
that's why vision is important. How big do we want to be? What is our goal? And growth is always, something I'm interested in. So being at least moderately transparent with everybody around you so they're aware of what your vision is, and making sure they see you enough and talking about it enough, that it's one of those things that early on, okay, right now this is what you're doing, but you're learning the whole thing of it. That way, as we grow, they will then manage, then they are going to have an assistant, and so thinking about it and operationally preparing for it, telling my one guy that, hey, to some extent, when we get to this point, that you can't do it on your own, then we're going to bring in somebody part-time and start training them. And so that will be your responsibility. And at that point, there's a pay bump and all that other stuff, but they're really in charge of that area, and so we have had some people that have been with us for a long time, that they can see the growth potential. And so they've, they're on board with that. And so, they assist with it. So.
Cool. You mentioned Etsy earlier. You still use that as
that as
your
our
platform?
primary source of sales.
Cool.
Really?
That's interesting. So can you talk a bit more about just the platform in general, why you chose it, just for business owners that are kind of wondering, where they should start in terms of selling a product?
Yeah, I mean, it's Etsy. I hear lots of good and bad things.
Yeah.
It depends on what market you're in and what you're trying to do. I want to say they have it's like 4 to 7 million stores on there, right? Which is huge. I think early on it was because it was the primary location. When we started our store, it was a primary location where handmade goods were sold.
Yeah.
So that's what we were doing. We were hand making stuff. So let's start there.
Mm-hmm.
And we've just decided, through lots of things, that it worked really well for us in a lot of ways. Now, we do lots of other stuff off of there, but we do a lot of stuff that's word of mouth, or that, again, we make lights that spell stuff and other kinds of stuff. And so you got a highly visible product. So lots of work comes from other places now. But we still stick with Etsy, and sometimes people say, I don't sell anything. It depends what market you're in, and are you doing the same thing that there's 10,000 other stores literally selling, and so you have a lot of competition. So to stick out is really difficult.
Yeah.
And so I like the review system. It doesn't give you the ability to delete them, things like that. So they're pretty straightforward and realistic, and that fact that you don't worry that whoever is hosting it is modifying that or letting the business modify it.
Right.
And that's really, that's a double-edged sword, and that can be scary for some people. But we've really liked Etsy. I mean, it's worked for us. And so, I don't know, we're just still there. I mean, we have plans, but we're still, I think this is still, we're still in the learning phase, right? Expertising in all these really random areas and optimizing things, like the last year we've been spending just ridiculous amounts of time on shipping stuff. Shipping is such a huge component because 98% of our stuff basically ships. And so, it's a good opportunity. We're in that environment, I'm still learning about all these other things.
Cool.
So,
yeah. With Etsy, is there a way that because like you said, there's sometimes 10,000 other businesses selling the same thing as you. So do they, promote you or other stores in any certain ways? Is there a certain algorithm that makes certain stores show up before others?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's always paid for advertising. We have some paid for advertising, but yeah, I mean, just making sure that you're fitting in with all the SEO requirements, becoming an expert in SEO and algorithms, and understanding what algorithms are really looking for, and so. That's just really helpful. So just paying money to somebody isn't necessarily the best method, because it's really good to understand how that process is working. How are you getting charged and all of these other things, what things are going to help boost those, etc. So making sure that you're consistent with them, because in social media, most platforms, the algorithms are made to benefit the company. They're made to make money. For sure. Right? That's how they That's how they generate revenue. And so thinking of everything you're doing, how does me doing this thing on my site or this, et cetera, impact their ability to make money? Yeah. Which is really important, right? And and so in being realistic about that.
Do you do any other sort of paid advertising?
Yeah, we do some. Etsy actually they've had some pretty good programs over the couple of years. I'm not as familiar with them fully, so we have I guess she's our closest thing to a GM, but she's our sales manager. She handles the HR stuff largely, and all these other things. But they've had really good programs like with Google Ads matching, and now Ad Money is their algorithm. It feeds out into multiple other platforms, and so based on what fits best under those search requirements, and so it auto feeds, so I'll randomly, have people like, hey, is this yours? Type of thing on some other weird platform, and and that's how they get there. Like, we don't advertise on that other platform, directly. It's just some coordinated partnership through Etsy. And so they've had, and so we've been able to utilize those rather than having to have, all these paid for ads in all these different places. So again, making it a little more efficient.
Do you spend more time cleaning your pool than you spend swimming in it? Then call Flamingo Pools today. Flamingo Pools is your go-to swimming pool maintenance and repair company in the East Valley. Whether it's weekly maintenance, repairs, green to cleans, or one-time cleanings, Flamingo Pools will take care of you. Honest, reliable, and innovative. Just a few of the many good things Flamingo Pools customers have to say about them. Ask them about their mineral treatment, which will keep your chemical levels down, allowing you to have a healthier bathing experience. At Flamingo Pools, they know that your pool was made to be enjoyed, so let them handle the rest. Check them out at azflamingopools.com or give them a call at 480-422-6013. Mention this podcast and you'll get your first month of maintenance completely free. That's azflamingopools.com and 480-422-6013.
Why don't you tell us a bit about, your actual product? What are some of the things you sell? Because you have some custom things, right? But are there also some standards that you guys make?
Yeah, most of what we make has been designed by us in-house, me, I guess, and then feedback from my team. So most of what we make are lights and decor, all made from steel. So everything from marquee letters to animals to lightning bolts, cactus, you name it.
You can think it, you can make it.
Yeah. And so do that stuff. And then a lot of wall decor. So we don't post as much on our social media about the wall decor though. And some of that's a branding issue. We're known for lights and that's our primary product. But, we do all this other stuff that I consider more artsy. Wall decor stuff that is sold in retail stores. So that's most of it. We do some custom orders. We probably do, 3 or 4 a month that are custom. It's just,
Or someone commissioned you to do
something specific. And it used to be a lot more. We've just really throttled back on that because, in the workflow, it's not as efficient. I know a lot of times people think, custom is where it's all at. Well, it just depends. Depends on how your operation functions. For me, some of the products that I've designed, it's easier for me to make. It's easier to make 50 of them than one. It's the setup time, the finishing time. The cost of what you have to do is easier to do big runs of them. That's why we have, excuse me, big conglomerate manufacturing companies. They make really. I always tell my wife, like candy bars, right? Candy bars are a really cheap price point, but they make 1 billion of them a year, right? And so, not that we want to make 1 billion of anything in a year, which even though I wouldn't mind because that means people are buying product from local, meaning local in the perspective of the 50 states, right? Yeah. Products that are produced here and sold here. And so the more that I can sell, the less that people are probably going to buy from imports.
What's been your favorite product over the years to create?
My favorite product? Man. I don't know. I don't even know if I have a favorite. The things that are favorite to me are stuff that are one-off, stuff that I've made for myself, stuff that's probably in my home. So I have some projects that I've done that I've never posted pictures of, and they're things that I made for my kids, and I've just kind of kept those for myself because they are my favorite. No one else. When you make a lot of stuff and a lot of different stuff, not everything is in the public domain, and we're in a business because we make we'll make those things more. And there's some stuff that I just for the time being, they become my favorites because again, there's meaning in it. So it's like it's a different level of attachment to the product. For sure. There's love. It's made with love, so to say. So those are usually my favorites. Cool. So I don't know if I have any, I've met people in random places in the U.S. and we were on vacation in California and somebody said, "Oh, what do you do?" I said, "Oh, we're own a commercial art manufacturing company." That's kind of like the technical thing, but artists, we make lights, decor. Oh, like what kind of stuff? I'm like, oh, like vintage style marquee stuff. So, oh, do you make those cactus? Yes, we make those cactus. So there's some stuff like that is it's become kind of brand specific, I guess. We make a lot of cactus. I never wanted to be the cactus guy though, because I don't even, I don't necessarily love cactus. I don't hate them, but it's, it's just kind of like, okay.
You don't necessarily hug them.
Yeah, and so, I randomly made the first one and we listed it and sold it in 30 minutes. So it said, okay, well, that might be good to make some more of. And so, not my favorite, but definitely one of those things that's like, okay.
Yeah, you see a lot. Now you've got art all over the country. And all over the world, really. You got pieces in multiple countries. Any famous pieces that you're particularly proud of? That
We do a lot of stuff under NDAs, so non-disclosure agreements.
Gotcha.
So like we'll post some of the bigger stuff, like celeb stuff, etc. But I don't know. Like I've got 4 kids and I have a business, so I don't really know. I mean, when I say I don't know who anyone is, I don't know who. We just posted recently a project that we worked on with J&J Design Group out of Scottsdale, and it was for Russell Wilson and Sierra's homes, and I didn't know who either of them were. So my wife was like, "Oh, that's really, really cool," and I'm like, "Oh, who are they?" But it's like that a lot. There's some that I would say when they're in my wheelhouse has been really cool. Like we've done a couple things for a couple artists that were kind of fun. Like and again, we didn't know who it was for, and so this kind of goes into that mentality of you never know who the product's really for, and it doesn't really matter because that product should be the same regardless of who's getting it. It doesn't matter if it's a celebrity. It doesn't matter if it's
some guy
just somebody else, some random person. It shouldn't matter because you don't know who it's really for, but more importantly, you don't know who's ever going to see it. And so there's been a couple cool ones that I listen to a lot of EDM. I'm like a 40-year-old big fan of EDM. Still wear my hat backwards. And we did something for Cascade. I don't know if you know who that is.
Heard of him, yeah.
But it ended up being on his album cover, and it was kind of cool just because this is a musician that I listen to on a regular basis, and so that's always kind of cool. And so I always joke it's kind of like artists who inspire artists, if I call myself that, So I always appreciate that, listen to the music while I'm making it, and then the only reason we found out is because somebody left a review or whatever and said, "Hey, check out the new album," or whatever, and went over there. Yeah, so that's kind of cool. But not for other than the fact that, this is somebody I'm inspired by. But other than that, I mean, there's lots of stuff we've done, and it's, my wife always says, "Oh, it's really cool, but can we post it?" That's usually the thing, so you do all this stuff, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, we just did this stuff for this person," and she's like, "Can we post it?" No, I'm like, it doesn't matter, because kind of the mentality is it doesn't really matter, because, again, who else is going to see that? Right? Who else is in that person's home? You have, again, these are taking the opportunities that you're given, right? Excel at it, make sure that it's great, and respond, and make sure you're responsive. Again, it's going into taking those opportunities to shine. Yeah. Because who else walked through that house? Who are they friends with? Mm-hmm. So it's not just thinking about that one person, so to say.
That's cool. I wanted to talk a bit about your background in psychology and how that has kind of influenced the work you do and kind of given you a different mindset with everything you do.
I think, it's really odd things like light bulbs, which is a really obscure thing. And we get asked a lot, why we don't use more LED bulbs. And part of it is because there's a significant cost increase. And so trying to stay within a certain price point is really important. We have that, and they look different. And a lot of times, if you've ever looked at an LED diode or whatever, if you look at LED, they're really bright and abrasive, right? And so our typical product, that we've sold thousands and thousands of products, has these warm white light bulbs. They're soft, they're inviting. And so what does that tell you about the product? And then you switch those light bulbs out, and they have a tendency to be really abrasive, and so you don't want to look at them directly. And so if you don't really want to look at it, then what's the point? Why are you going to buy a product that is abrasive for you to look at? Because you're probably not going to. Things like that. Or random things like posting online. Things like making sure things are centered and cropped appropriately, etc. Because again, you have a microsecond to capture someone's attention, and even though somebody might not say that picture is off-centered, you can tell something's not okay with it, right? Sure. It just makes you a little uneasier rather than So taking the time to do things like that, making sure Yeah, I mean, it bleeds into everything.
Yeah.
You know, like packaging. I talk to my guys. We have really simple packaging. We use, straight brown boxes with no writing on them, one stamp and a label, and fragile stickers, but no fancy high-end boxes, because most of the time when people get a product, what do? They're going to throw out the box right away. This isn't something they're keeping around, and we can pass that on to our customers. But opening the box, like, okay, if you're wrapping something and you have to tape it, put the tape on the box, put the pretty end on the upside. It's like unboxing. That's really just psychology, marketing. All of it all rolls into it. I've always kind of said psychology is the underlying foundation to all human interaction. Cognition, perception, behavioral conditioning, emotions, etc. How do the things we say and post affect people, all the way around? Whether it's centering of your picture to something you said, and so it also makes it super difficult because I overthink everything.
Yeah.
So that's where sometimes it's nice, at the same time to bring somebody in, because I'm like, okay, need to let it go.
Yeah. How about from an employer standpoint? Does the knowledge of psychology help you with your employees when you're interacting with them?
No, I mean, don't really use anything there. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I'm in the shop every day, so I'm very connected. I wear a lot of different hats, and I like that. They all know I work a lot, and so it's not like I'm just checked out. I don't think I will ever check out until I'm to the point where I want to be, which is not where I am currently. And so as I continue going down the road, I just want to be able to do some more stuff that I can. But, right now it's the employees just, practice as you preach, do as
Now, you mentioned you're an ultra marathon runner.
Well, I used to be.
Used to.
Yeah, back in the day.
That was my question,
Yeah.
because you also mentioned that work is kind of all-consuming. Sometimes you work 6-7 days a week with all the demands. Are you able to balance a little bit? Or what do you do to intentionally create some personal self-care and wellness for yourself?
Yeah, and so I do. It's weird. My days are broken up oddly. We have 4 kids, and so my wife is she's a nurse, and so she works evenings, and so she doesn't get home till like 11:30, and so that means I get up every morning with our kids, and so from 6 to about 8 I'm with all the kids and get them ready for school until she gets up and finishes them up. I have to bring 2 of my kids to school before I go to work, and so I always have that 2+ hours, which is nice, and then I'm always home by about 5:30 until 8 o'clock. That's family time. So, and then a lot of nights at that point I'll go back to work at 8 o'clock if my wife's not working, if I need to. And so, weekends a lot of times are based around naps, so that way I'm missing any of that time, so I'm present. I think it's really easy to miss all that time. My kids are little, I only have one opportunity with them, so be home and be present. And that was an expectation by my wife, and I'm really thankful that she had that expectation. Or a long time ago it was 5:30 to 7:30, no phone, like no work stuff, no any of this, and this is our time. So ultimately I still get, I put the kids to bed, and I'll put all 4 kids to bed if my wife is working, and so I'm involved in there. But with 4 kids in a business and a bunch of employees, I mean, that is my life. We have friends, but it's difficult because those things just we have age 2 to 11. Those things are pretty consuming, so there's not a lot of time outside of that, and so that's finding self-care time. And so what I do in self-care time is I do art. So most of the stuff I make on a daily basis I don't view as like, oh, I made this artistic creation. I kind of reject the artist's label a lot, because I don't, again, for me, I have to have like really a passionate connection with what I'm doing. And so I broke my back last year, so I didn't say
at work.
No, I fell down the stairs while I was holding our 9-month-old.
Oh, no.
And I fractured 4 vertebrae. And so 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, and but throwing that in there and having to learn to be more efficient, take help, and all these other things have been kind of key things that you learn, like take care of yourself. Okay, I don't have all the time in the world, and sitting there and realizing having to rely on other people, and so it kind of helps with getting rid of some of those responsibilities, or being willing more to pass them on.
You had mentioned as well when I went into the shop that that you kind of deal with competition overseas because they can kind of sell and create similar things as you. So what do you do to make customers stay loyal to you and purchase your products rather than go somewhere else?
And as a follow-up to that, how do you protect your intellectual property?
You only can so much. And so it depends on who you're protecting it from. The good thing about social media and the realm of online activities is if somebody does violate some type of intellectual property in some way, you can throttle them pretty good and drag it out, make people pretty aware. But a lot of it always has to go into the price point. And so being trim and efficient enough to be able to provide a quality product at a price point that people are willing to pay,
acceptable.
right? Yeah. And so you have to have the consumer in mind, right? They have two options for product, import from major retailer, right? It's at a very low price point versus something that is handmade, higher quality materials, etc. But it has to be within, a pretty tight price point, and trying to make sure you're doing that. And again, being aware of how you're pricing things, making sure, don't make it $101, let it fall under that $100 search function, right? And stuff like that. So you're in the same range as them, or, I think that's a lot of it. But, you have stuff that people are going to, use ideas and stuff, but that's kind of how creativity works. Like you're always going to have inspiration for someplace, but it's about being ethical and practical about it, in the fact that you're not being manipulative and deceitful and all those other things, giving credit. And so, we've had a couple times where there's been questionable stuff, but haven't really run into too many problems. When you go to like an art show and everyone says no pictures, I'm like, take pictures all you want, right? If you can make it for the same price or cheaper, then I need to do a better job.
I want to know that.
And so some of it's going to be a competitive nature, right?
Right.
And so like, oh, okay, well, you're going to go that route, and so okay, we'll handle it. You know, and so but we're realistic and we have plans in how to handle those things. So that way, you're always prepared. Part of psychology and a lot of what I did before was risk assessment, risk management. And so in risk management, you have to prepare for the full spectrum of outcomes. And that means always being prepared for the worst and the best, right? And so that way you can respond without being completely destructed if something happens, right? And panicking and flailing your arms and complaining and stuff. No, like, all right, it is what it is. Now let's run. So
back to what I was going to say earlier. So we're kind of talking about, how busy you are with everything. And then earlier you had mentioned that you're not where you want to be in terms of the future. What does that future look like for you? Does it look like less work on your end? Does it look like, just a bigger business altogether?
I don't even know if I have it that detailed out. I kind of, one of the things I've always reiterated since I was in my early 20s was, my 5-year plan is I'm plan and hope to be someplace bigger and better than I am right now. And how that's defined is very vague. And could be doing anything else, again, wherever it goes is where I will kind of follow. So, so even though there's more, inside I have, I think, bigger visions than that, but they sometimes sound a bit grandiose. And so I usually keep, so even my team sometimes, doesn't know like the full scale of like what I would like to see and what I think is realistic. And those things will happen if we're ready and if that's something that, is a good fit and we think we can do, and we'll see.
Still just going with the flow, right?
Yeah. That's kind of just kind of the way it's always gone. Yeah. And that's opportunities, I kind of preach that. Yeah.
Well, Marty, before we start to close up here, why don't you give us, one last piece of advice to entrepreneurs and business owners that are listening today?
Expect in return only what you give. Being realistic about what you can accomplish and having unrealistic ideas. And so being okay, sometimes I just read Elon Musk's 1-page resume the other day. And if you get an opportunity, look at the headline or the top lines on it. And it's, if anyone else said that, if you read that, it would sound absolutely grandiose. Is all being like, it goes into the realm of like, looking for a self-sustaining planet and interplanetary travel and colonization, right?
Yeah.
On Mars. Like, you can't get much more grandiose, but look, he's doing it.
Yeah.
And so, being realistic about what your capabilities are, but you only know what your capabilities are if you test yourself frequently. Practice like you play. That way you're prepared. And so there's a lot of times, and it's in the shop during production and stuff, just because you're slow, just because there's not a lot to do, you don't treat it that way.
Yeah.
And so you still are efficient. I would rather watch somebody to be super efficient and then sit around for a half an hour than do the things that only took them 15 minutes to do in a half hour. Because I know that they're prepared. So if it does get really busy, like overwhelmingly, we're going to be able to respond and not be panicked and, have composure. It's kind of like, fire drills. You do them so that way you're prepared. So if there's something, you know what to do and you're not panicked, right? And so, again, that's partly psychology.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I hear a lot of parallels with your ultra marathon running and knowing your limits, yet pushing your limits and doing your very best.
It just depends on what you want to accomplish,
Yep.
Seeing what you're capable of. And I think it's not for everyone, definitely. A lot of people, like my wife, she wants to do her day job, and she wants to have that other time, but it's part of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I'd like to be that guy that, I got done and I just relaxed, now brain keeps running. And,
Not wired that way.
no, not so much.
Yeah, it's a great thing if you can obviously, have realistic expectations for what you can do, but not letting that stop you from dreaming
from being
big.
unrealistic sometimes.
Right, yeah.
It's like, everybody else might think you're unrealistic, but, occasionally you have to demonstrate that you're not. And, sometimes you get to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, there's a quote I heard, something along the lines of, if you shoot for the moon, you'll land somewhere stuck in space, but if you shoot for the stars, you'll land on the moon. So don't stop your dreams. Don't stop your goals from being unrealistic.
Yeah.
Who knows what you can accomplish.
Sometimes you need to remember that, you need to stop and think, like, is there a box to start with?
Yeah.
Instead of thinking, I don't know, it's just,
Cool. Love it. Well, had a lot of fun here today, Marty. Learned a lot from you. Can't believe we're already at the hour. Before we close up, though, we have a quick game we're going to play with you.
Okay.
So how it's going to work is we've got a list of questions we're going to ask you, and you got 60 seconds to answer as many of them as possible. So I will pull them up here. We'll start.
Let me start.
Yep. 3, 2, 1.
If you had to eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Tacos.
If you could switch places with someone for a day, who would it be?
Jeff Bezos.
Favorite restaurant?
Oh man, I'm really sorry. Judy's in San Francisco.
Okay. Pet peeve.
Pet peeve. Inefficiency.
What's your nickname?
I don't have one.
Okay.
Like, literally.
Marty the Man.
I don't know.
Favorite smell. Okay. Favorite smell.
Favorite smell. Fresh cut steel. No, I'm just kidding. Evergreens.
Favorite fictional character?
Hey.
You remind me of the Flash.
Time.
Yeah. I don't know anyone, dude.
We're good. We'll go with the Flash there.
Yeah, we're gonna go with the Flash. Yeah, just how fast you are, always going.
Oh my gosh.
And
yeah, it's not for everyone, dude.
Yeah.
I've been running for a long time. Not physically running.
Well, literally
I
as
stopped
well with the
physically
marathons.
running. I've stopped physically running after my second kid. I was getting up at 3:45 every morning.
Mm-hmm.
I would go run ridiculous miles before work.
Wow.
I'd get home and my wife is up with our 6-month-old, and I'd take a shower and go to work.
Yeah.
And it was really selfish, post hoc. It was really, and she was like, done. And I was like, all right.
okay,
Oh, yeah.
I get the message.
Yeah, and I mean it was a good decision. So take on the responsibility. The kids are 50% my responsibility.
Yeah.
We both work, and she has to work just as hard as I do, which is saying a lot. So I'm kind of a beast when it comes to work ethic.
Yeah.
I don't know. So yeah, someday I'll stop and I'll be like, chill out. Yeah, that's why.
No, you're not wired to chill out.
No, but it's really funny. When we're just doing something and I anytime we're out, like we'll go something. It's before a pandemic, but like, dude, she's like hauling, and I'm like a slug, and she's like, seriously? I'm like, oh yeah, when I'm off, slow way down. But yeah, I've been like that for forever.
Yeah. Do you ever have a desire to do a marathon again? Or are you officially?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think it would. I don't think it would be as hard as. It should be. And the only reason I say that is because mentally I've still been running marathons.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I haven't stopped that. And if anything, I've become more resilient, more, like I said, I broke my back last year. I had 10 weeks where I couldn't lift more than 5 pounds, and so like my job was to get healthy.
Yeah.
And like, being completely like just absolutely physically and psychologically crushed and like having to crawl out of that as fast as you can because you have employees and
Right.
a family to take care of.
Yeah.
And, like I didn't have the luxury to give up. And so again, it's just what am I capable of? I'm like, dude, got broken back last year, COVID this year, and like ready for something different.
What's next, right?
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like the marathons
Yes,
really like helped with your mental strength and mental capacity to deal with anything that comes in your way.
Yeah. So
Nice. Okay. Well, Marty, thanks again for coming on. We've obviously learned a lot from having you here today. As we're closing up, why don't you let our listeners know where they can find you online if they want to check you out and get order something?
Anything hashtag San Steel, SAWANDSTEEL, or sansteel.etsy.com. We have a standalone at sansteel.com, but it just bumps you over to Etsy.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks again for being here today. Cool. Catch you all
Thanks,
next week.
Marty.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. Just a few things before we go. First off, we wanted to say a big thank you to our sponsor, Legend Acres. They're an award-winning, veteran-owned small business that offers dog training, service dog training, mentor training programs, and more. Legend Acres also offers online interactive training sessions and on-demand classes so you can train your dog from the comfort and convenience of your own home. Check them out at legend-acres.com. Also, if you enjoyed the show, please take a few seconds to rate and review and hit that subscribe button. It lets us know how we're doing and helps us grow so we can reach more locals, entrepreneurs, and help small businesses grow. Thanks, guys.